Look at the sheer velocity of this construction. Cities are expanding outward at a breakneck pace, echoing the explosive expansions of the early Asian tigers. Millions of tons of cargo are flowing through these newly expanded deep-sea ports, directly connecting domestic output to global markets. Inland, sprawling highway networks are weaving right through existing residential areas, wiring factories directly to these coastal hubs. On paper, this mirrors the exact strategy China used 2 decades ago to engineer its own rise. But running that exact playbook today leads straight into a massive financial hazard: the local debt crisis. To maintain relentless construction speeds, Chinese municipalities relied heavily on local government financing vehicles. These off-the-books entities allowed local officials to borrow massive sums, hiding unsustainable liabilities just to keep pouring concrete. Vietnam has to generate that same explosive momentum, but it has to do the math differently. The objective is to build out the nation's infrastructure without detonating its own sovereign balance sheet. This chart compares fixed asset investment as a percentage of gross domestic product between the two nations. At its peak, China pushed this investment to 45% of its entire economy, driven largely by that decentralized, highly risky local borrowing. Vietnam caps this investment between 30 and 33%. Instead of letting local provinces borrow freely, the capital flows through a centralized national budget. By rationing the infrastructure spend, the government manages to keep its total public debt contained at 37% of GDP. That centralized approach protects the national treasury. However, every time the state finishes a new highway with public funds, the land values along that route instantly surge. Private developers aggressively rush in, building luxury high-rises to capture the newly created wealth of these corridors. When speculators pocket the profits generated by public roads, real estate prices are pushed out of reach for the working class. The infrastructure succeeds, but it triggers an immediate housing crisis. The laborers keeping the export economy running suddenly find themselves unable to afford rent anywhere near the factory floors they operate. To fix this, the government established the Social Housing Sector, or NOx. But right now, the program is paralyzed, caught between the state's welfare goals and the profit demands of the private developers tasked with building them. Vietnam is looking past China to find a working blueprint, studying the highly organized public housing towers of Singapore. A direct copy is impossible. The two nations operate on entirely different land ownership laws and financial architecture. But the core strategy remains. The state must use heavy legal frameworks to pull all commercial speculation out of the affordable housing equation. The entire real estate approach has to pivot. The priority is securing stable, long-term rentals so the workforce can stay housed and productive, completely removing the incentive to buy and flip properties for a quick payout. The state is planning to reclaim the real estate value generated by its own infrastructure. By capturing those land premiums, public funds can directly finance massive, state-owned satellite cities equipped with schools and hospitals. Inside those cities, the model shifts away from selling property altogether. Instead, the government offers long-term leases, locked in at 15 to 20. It strips out emotional decision-making and closes the loopholes that allow local corruption to dictate housing assignments. Fixing the housing loop is only one part of the transition. The next step is moving past the heavy industrial era entirely and laying down the architecture for tomorrow's economy. That requires a dense network of telecommunications towers to provide the digital backbone necessary for these algorithmically managed, highly connected urban zones. And to power it all independently, utility-scale solar grids and wind farms are being integrated directly into the surrounding landscapes. Vietnam is studying the past to engineer closed-loop systems that control both capital flow and land speculation. They are proving that long-term dominance requires mastering the economic forces of growth, rather than just pouring concrete and hoping for the best.